Toldot 4. This next Toldot, or document, spends a lot of time on a genealogy. If you'd rather watch paint dry, I've included a useful video inset in the upper left-hand corner of your screen. But this genealogy isn't just tracing a wooden family line. It's designed to make a point. This is the account of Noah's sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Sons were born to them after the flood. The sons of Japheth were Gomer, Magog, Madai, Javan, Tubal, Meshech, and Tiras. Oh, that's 7 names. That's been an important number in the story so far. And then it says, the sons of Gomer were Ashkenaz, Riphath, and Togarmah. The sons of Javan were Elisha, Tarshish, the Kittim, and the Dodanim. So the narrator picks out Gomer's 3 sons and Javan's 4 sons, but then doesn't elaborate on Japheth's other grandsons. Apparently, exhaustiveness isn't the goal here. And why do we see the Kittim and the Dodanim here? Those are people groups in the plural form, mixed in with singular names of either people or cities. The number 7 often represents fullness or completion in the biblical world. And from these, the coastlands of the nations were separated into their lands, every one according to its language, according to their families, by their nations. Many of these nations were considered the edges of the land. These were distant, mysterious lands. You might recognize Tarshish as the place where Jonah fled to get as far from the calling of God as he could imagine. But God had sent out his blessing to all these lands, and there was flourishing. And there's great hope that God would be known even in these far exotic realms. We should also notice that this generalized description of nations and lands shows that this genealogy isn't trying to be exhaustive. There were other nations, but it's not trying to name every single one. Well, now we focus in on people who have a closer history with Israel. Verse 6. The sons of Ham were Kush, that's the region of Ethiopia, and sometimes including Sudan. Mitzrayim, that's the Hebrew word for Egypt. Put, that's probably Libya, and Canaan, that's southern Syria, including Palestine and Phoenicia. And we saw Noah curse this line in the previous chapter. The sons of Kush were Seba, Havilah, Sabta, Rama, and Sabteka. The sons of Ra'amah were Sheba and Dedan. So again, the narrator picks 5 sons of Kush and 2 sons of Ra'amah to equal 7, but then we have a little interruption in the flow of this genealogy. We saw 5 sons of Kush, but there was one more. It says Cush was the father of Nimrod, a name which means we will rebel. He began to be a valiant warrior on the earth. He was a mighty hunter before the Lord. He was a Gibor, a mighty one. Back in chapter 6, there was a reference to the mighty ones. The Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and also after this, when the sons of God were having sexual relations with the daughters of humankind, who gave birth to their children. They were the mighty heroes of old, the famous men. This has led some to believe that Nimrod was in fact a Nephilim, a giant. At the very least, he's being portrayed as a mighty hunter, the stuff of legend. In fact, our author adds this little note. That is why it is said, like Nimrod, a mighty hunter before the Lord. So apparently in the audience's day, people would use that phrase and not really know where it came from. Nimrod had become a household name. So we have a connection between these two stories. There's strength and there's fame. These will be important as our story unfolds. Nimrod had made a name for himself because he was powerful and violent. At this point, we should be thinking, okay, the Sons of God story ended in God's judgment. What's going to happen to Nimrod's empire? Well, the primary regions of his kingdom were Babel, Erech, Akkad, and Calneh in the land of Shinar. So we should be tuned into that phrase, in the land of Shinar. It might pop up in the next chapter. From that land he went to Assyria, where he built Nineveh, Rehoboth-ir, Calah, and Resen, which is between Nineveh and the great city Calah. Do we know anyone else who went and built a city? Oh, Cain in chapter 4. Both men were involved in bloodshed. Hunting animals for food was explicitly allowed in chapter 9. Maybe Nimrod saw and took whatever prey he wanted without regard for its life or source. The text doesn't tell us much, but we note his power and prestige, along with a kingdom in the land of Shinar. Next we have the line of Mitzrayim, or Egypt, and there are 7 people groups coming from there. Mitzrayim was the father of the Ludites, Anamites, Lehabites, Naphtuhites, Pathrusites, Casluhites, from whom the Philistines came, and Caphtorites. And then we move on to Canaan. It says Canaan was the father of Sidon, his firstborn, Heth, the Jebusites, Amorites, Girgashites, Hivites, Arkites, Sinites, Arvadites, Zemarites, and Hamathites. Eventually, the families of the Canaanites were scattered, and the borders of Canaan extended from Sidon all the way to Gerar, as far as Gaza, and all the way to Sodom, Gomorrah, Admah, and Zeboim, as far as Lasha. These are the sons of Ham according to their families, according to their languages, by their lands, and by their nations. We move on to the sons of Shem. Now Shem is this guy's name, but it's also the normal Hebrew word for name. So what happens to the line of name? The sons of Shem were Elam, Asher, Arphaxad, Lud, and Aram. The sons of Aram were Uz, Hul, Gether, and Mash. Arphaxad was the father of Shelah, and Shelah was the father of Eber. That might be where we get the name Hebrew, Eberu. 2 sons were born to Eber. One was named Peleg because in his days the earth was divided, and his brother's name was Joktan. Peleg is related to the Hebrew word divide or split. We've already seen a split between the brothers Cain and Abel. We saw a split between Ham and his brothers. Now there's a split in the land, and the story takes these brothers in 2 different directions. Right now we're going to focus on the Joktan line, and then in the next chapter we're going to focus on the Peleg line. So it lists some names, and it says all these were sons of Joktan. Their dwelling place was from Mesha all the way to Sephar in the eastern hills. These are the sons of Shem according to their families, according to their languages, by their lands, and according to their nations. And then the whole genealogy closes with, these are the families of the sons of Noah, according to their genealogies, by their nations. And from these the nations spread over the earth after the flood. Okay, so what can we learn from this genealogy? Well, it's clear that there is kinship among humankind. All people from every nation and family represent God. In fact, if you count up the names in this genealogy, excluding Nimrod, you get 70. It's a number representing totality. God repopulated his good earth. He placed us here on purpose to experience and channel his blessing. Paul puts it this way in his speech in Athens. The God who made the world and everything in it is the Lord of heaven and earth. He himself gives everyone life and breath and everything else. From one man he made all the nations, that they should inhabit the whole earth, and he marked out their appointed times in history and the boundaries of their lands. God did this so that they would seek him and perhaps reach out for him and find him, though he is not far from any one of us. For in him we live and move and have our being. As some of your own poets have said, we are his offspring. All people belong to God, and he wants them to know him. But humans are also accountable for the choices they make between wisdom and folly, between life and death, between experiencing the fullness of his blessing with him or seizing it for ourselves. And unfortunately, all have chosen death. But God promised in chapter 3 that the seed of the woman would crush the seed of the serpent. Where is this promised son? Will he be a mighty warrior with a great empire? Or does God work in more subtle ways? The next chapter will begin to answer that question.